close.
Talk to me, Sam. Keep talking, okay? I'm coming to get you. Just hold on. All I could do was watch in disbelief. Only when I felt the sharp pain and heard the grinding sand sound in my head did I release my jaw pressure and take a breath. I was getting dizzy, so I gave myself a mental slap in the face by forcing a verbal command through my tightly drawn mouth. There's nothing you can do. Calm down and breathe. There's nothing you can do. Calm down and breathe. It took a few more repeats for me to start believing it, although it was me who was saying it over and over again to myself. I held onto my sturdy rock and just wished somehow I could toss it over to Sam and she would be able to grab hold of it and would be okay. Then she could just hang on to my rock until we got to her. This is the kind of nonsense your mind delivers to you when you're in a hopeless situation. I can't imagine the kind of pain and fear that poor Samantha is going through. I felt so sorry for her, though I'd never even so much as had a sip of tea within 100 miles of her. Sam was every bit of a stranger to me, but seeing her wide, terrified eyes, the blood pouring from her arm, head, and leg, I couldn't help but feel pain for her. Come on, girl, you got this. I got your arm, okay? I have you, okay? You gotta trust me. I felt sorry for Rico, too. He had to be in pretty bad pain himself. He was suspended upside down, his back digging into the jagged cliff rocks, his hand clenched so tight that it was wider than mine. God help them both. I was in a safe enough spot that I was able to lean back and look over my right shoulder at the entire terrifying event, unfolding just 15 to 20 feet below me. I could see the soles of Rico's boots, his legs, most of his protruding chest, his right arm extended and stretched out and to the left in a distorted twist. I couldn't see his head from the intense backward curve his body was enduring. I'd already mentioned I was in a safe enough spot, meaning I was better off than Rico and poor Sam. I wasn't totally safe, though. I had to give up my rope so Rico could use it to pull Sam up and out of a jagged crevice that her foot had somehow got lodged inside after something apparently snapped. I was tied securely to a bolt and had a good foothold. I had yet begun to worry about what would happen if I didn't get my rope back. I could hear Rico's voice now, more calm and reassuring, but I couldn't tell quite what he was saying. The wind gusts were strong and frequent, and at this height, it could literally blow you off the side of the mountain. Any experienced climber will tell you that you don't dare move more than 2 limbs at the same time in this kind of wind. I began to wonder what happened. I was less than 100 feet from the top of the overhang and was looking forward to a little rest. It was unusually hot and everything just felt moist and sticky. We were all just drenched in sweat. The humidity was unusually high. We were struggling a bit. Rico and I switched positions because I was feeling a bit winded and dizzy, and I needed to climb the overhang before I got worse. So I took top rope. Rico took my place at the bottom to keep an eye on Sam and offer her a little additional training. She was pretty good, in fact. She fit right in with us. We were more experienced, so she hired the 2 of us to train her as a guide. She was from Colorado and wanted to start a mountain climbers camp for troubled teens. She knew how to hold her own, but didn't have a lot of experience in working as a team. So after sitting around for a few days, trying to find a break in the weather, Sam, Rico, and I finally got together for a day's climb up Goat Head Rock. We would camp out on top and descend after breakfast the next morning. Goat Head Rock was pretty much a straight-up climb except for the last 300 feet, which is an overhang protruding outwards about 30 feet. This means you have to, as Rico and I would say, go Spider-Man. Let me put this into perspective in case some of you don't know what I mean. Imagine you're climbing a steep hill. Now imagine your foot slips and you go sliding backwards on your belly. In order to stop, you would have to find something for your feet to hitch or something to grab onto. Now, imagine you're climbing straight up and down, and you let go. Well, you know what happens there. When you're climbing an overhang, if one foot slips, it tries to fall backwards and behind you. If your other foot slips, you are hanging on with two hands, and there is nothing for your feet to latch onto. At this point, if you don't have superb upper body strength and a strong grip, even with a top rope, you can be in serious trouble. Worst case scenario, you lose your grip and can't find a foothold. Eventually, your hands will lose strength and you'll plummet to the ground into a mass of meat and splinters. Needless to say, this is not a climb for amateurs. Sam was the least experienced, but far from an amateur. Rico and I have climbed countless overhangs with no issues. This was not even our first climb with a less experienced climber up Goathead Rock. Thankfully, Rico and I were pretty familiar with all the locations of the steel bolts that had been driven into the rocks over the years, so this was not an extreme challenging climb. The overhang is the only challenging part, but over the years it's been decorated with countless bolts from other climbers. That really made things so much easier and so much safer. Of course, this particular day we were challenging ourselves by not using them to give the climb a little more traditional approach. After I started feeling lightheaded though, I decided to go ahead and use the bolts so I could get finished. Until all hell broke loose, my biggest fear of the moment was shitting my pants and blasting Sam and Rico in the face with it. From a distance, you can plainly see why Goathead Rock was aptly named. It's a large slab of earth, separated from its mother mountain by an epic 2-foot crack that gradually widens to just over 30 feet at the top. The peak is slightly off-centered and slopes downward, front and back. The front slope is the longest and flattest, so it was also where we planned to camp that night once we got past the overhang. The overhang itself is not too steep, but it's longer than most. Instead of a sharp edge at the end, it has a gradual smooth curve, and you can easily underestimate it if you don't conserve your energy wisely. The nose is easier than it looks to climb, but it takes longer. I just made it through the worst part of the climb and was just a few feet from being vertical again. I guess something snapped on Sam's harness. She fell backwards with one leg lodged into a crevice. Her backpack began to slide off and ended up around her throat. She was forced to cut the straps away, letting all of her equipment, along with her rope, water, food, first aid kit, and all else fall to the ground, a few thousand feet below. She'd been hanging upside down by one leg with nothing to grab onto for nearly 5 minutes before Rico was able to get to her. On any other climb, Rico and I would have stayed below the less experienced climber just in case something like this happened. This was no ordinary event, and several things went wrong. Maybe we should have taken the hint when a freak thunderstorm came out of nowhere, delaying the climb by 3 hours. We had unusually strong winds even after the storm was dead and gone. There were missing and damaged bolts. I had a bad harness strap that kept slipping out every time I put pressure on it. We ran into a hornet nest 500 feet up a mountain and had to find another way around those. The clincher was my upset stomach and dizzy spells, which caused us to switch places. Now here we are in the worst possible situation, at least from what I could see looking back over my shoulder. My vulnerability by this point was really beginning to sink in. I found myself just as worried about not getting my rope back than I was about Sam and even Rico for that matter. What it all boils down to, they die, I die. A creeping terror overcame me. I remember a Bible verse that never quite made sense to me as a child. It is a terrible thing to fall into the hands of the Lord. I never quite got that when I was a kid. But knowing my life is in the hands of a dude I was having a farting contest with less than 48 hours ago is sinking in pretty hard. I'm not even in God's hands yet. God is still letting Rico handle it for now. I was just about to start praying when I heard 2 loud, painful screams from below. I peeked back over my shoulder to see Rico doing an amazing feat. He was literally doing a monster sit-up while upside down on a cliff face. On top of that, he was pulling the entire upper body weight of a very muscular woman who was literally choking him to death with a two-armed headlock. Rico's face was bloodshot from the strain, from the deathlock that poor, terrified Sam had on him. "Oh my God, he's doing it. He's doing it," I muttered under my breath. "Come on, Rico, you can do it, bro. You got this." I offered him all the encouragement I could, hoping maybe I can do my part in at least that. His screams fell into a tight, windless grunt, kind of what you would expect to hear in the final push of a baby delivery, at least at first. Rico gave all he could and let out a monstrous howl of defeat. The howl was cut short by a croaking sound. I didn't have to look back to know what was going on. Oh my God, I thought. I was almost too afraid to look back, hoping that if I didn't see it, it wouldn't be true. But I had to know. And if there was any way I could possibly do anything, this would be the time. Rico's face was a deep purple. His arms were flailing wildly, scratching, punching, kicking, clenching. The whites of his eyes were already growing red with blood. His nose gushing a dark, brownish red ooze of foamy blood. I screamed as loud as I could. "Sam, you're choking him! Let go of his neck! Grab his arms! Sam, you're gonna kill us all! Sam! Let go, Samantha! Let him go! You're killing us all!" Rico was already silent and motionless. Sam was grunting and screaming, choking what was left out of the life of my best friend since the 7th grade. I totally understood it, though. It was like drowning. In a panic, you just lose all control, and you will drown any and everyone around you just for that last breath of air. No! I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I had a safety lanyard attached to my eye bolt and attached to my harness. It was enough to keep me safe for hours, but it also kept me pinned up against a wall. I placed both of my feet onto a protruding stone lip just below me and gave a shove upwards, taking the slack out of my lanyard. I unlatched it, grabbed onto the rusty steel bolt with one hand, and scrambled around to the left for something to grab hold to. Nothing. I tried the right side, but the surface was hard but smooth. I pushed back up with my feet and reattached the lanyard to the bolt and detached the other end from my harness. Holding on to the bottom end of my lifeline, I lowered myself down to the lip that my feet had been resting on for the past half hour. One hand on one end of the lanyard and one hand on the stone lip. I made a quick prayer and let go of the lanyard. Holding on with both hands, I lowered my feet downward. Come on, please, give me something to hold on to. Come on, come on! I slid my legs down, my feet looking for something, anything to rest on. Nothing. I just hung there for a moment. I swung my body left, nothing. Swung to the right, nothing. I looked straight down my stomach and through my legs to see what the situation was. All I could see was Rico's feet, and they were kicking around violently. "Samantha, please!" I begged one last time, still trying to find something to put my feet on. I suddenly felt the next bolt and was able to barely rest my foot on it. My arms were beginning to burn. There was no way I could exchange a hand for the bolt that my foot was on. Even if I could, what then? Hang on by a few fingers for a few seconds and hope there was another dent to grab onto? I was running out of energy. I pushed off with my foot and pulled up as hard as I could. I grabbed the bottom of my lanyard and pulled myself back up. I connected the lanyard to my harness once more and immediately leaned back and looked over my shoulder. Rico was going limp, and Sam was still wrapped around his neck. He looked dead. So did Sam. She was still locked around his lifeless neck and just staring up. "Sam, grab his harness and let him go." By the look in her eyes, she was already gone. Any minute now she would tire and fall. We would all be dead soon. I was suddenly overcome with sheer panic. Because of the storm earlier that day, no one was out on the cliffs today. No one but us. No one would even check on us. Not for a few days at least. We screwed up bad. I fished out my phone, but I knew better. No service. A sinking despair that began when Sam began to choke out Rico was now in full bloom. What am I going to do? I whispered out loud to myself, not allowing myself to cry just yet. I just hung there in my little space on the earth and let my legs dangle into the air. I knew this much, that I will need my leg and arm strength just to stay alive for the next few hours. I rearranged my thought process to take in 1 minute at a time. It was all I could do for the moment. 1 minute, I'll rest my legs and think. 1 minute, I'll go over everything in my pouch. 1 minute, I will rest my arms. 1 minute, I'll hang by my harness and work on slowing my breathing. And 1 minute, I'll scream for help. Then, I'll repeat. After the first 5 minutes and after the last of my screams echoed around the canyons, I began to hear Sam crying below me. I knew what was happening. She was getting weak. Sam, can you hear me? Sam? Samantha! There was a long silence and a whimper. I heard her speak. I'm slipping, she complained weakly. Sam, if you don't let go and pull yourself up, you and I are both going to die. Do you understand? We'll never see our families again. We will die. You have to get your head right and pull yourself up. I secured my feet on the ledge and pushed up, taking the slack out of the lanyard. I detached it from my harness and grabbed the end so that I could lean out further and look Sam in the eyes. Sam, look at me. She stared up blankly. She didn't have much more strength. I can't. Yes, you can. I'm sorry, she added weakly. You can do this, Sam. You can do it. Now listen to me. Look at my fucking foot. The sound of her scream shocked me dead still. I leaned back still further and looked past Rico's limp body to look at her foot. My heart stopped, and all hope left the scene of the accident. I could finally see her left foot dangling loosely in the air, and her right foot contorted, twisted, badly broken, and tightly jammed into a crevice. It was almost up to her knee. Her foot was lodged into what we call the pool. It was a protruding bowl-shaped rock that offered a good grip and sometimes held water after a rain. I guess it was about knee-deep, but you certainly didn't want to put your foot in it. Sam's foot was badly broken and probably her shin. The pain she must have endured so far began to clarify itself. Hanging upside down by a broken leg, I couldn't imagine it. I suddenly noticed how the main rope was attached. It was secured to a bolt and looped back through Rico's belay. I followed it outward to see that it was just laying across another bolt. If Sam could somehow swing Rico back and forth, it just may slip off the bolt, fall right into her hands. Listen, Sam, I know it's bad, but can you swing back and forth? If so, you may be able to shake the rope loose. If you can swing him side to side, the rope might fall into your hands. Can you do that? Sam? There was no answer. I leaned back again to look at her eyes. I didn't see her eyes. I didn't see her at all. Without a sound, she simply disappeared. Leaning back a bit further, I could see her legs still jammed into the pool. The rest of her body disappeared beyond the curve of the overhang. The last of the day's visible light began to vanish beyond the horizon. I began to whimper, then sob. That was it. There was only me trying to stay alive in my little spot. A sound awoke me. I had only dozed off for a few minutes. I immediately jerked my legs into place but couldn't find my footing. It took a few moments to realize my legs were numb. My crotch burned intensely from the harness, which was cutting into my skin and cutting off the circulation of my legs. I fumbled around for the rock with my hands and pulled myself up against the cliffside. I flailed my tingling legs around, trying to find a foothold, but it did me no good. I would have to wait until the feeling came back in them before they would be any use to me. I grunted as I bore my full weight by my fingertips. The tingling in my legs was excruciating, but I couldn't afford to be petty. I forced my legs to the spot where I knew the foothold was, and giving a good guess, I pushed upwards. The weight on my fingers decreased, so I knew I was on the foothold. My legs pulsated with awful tingles, but for the most part I just ignored it. I had an eerie feeling. The wind was calm. It was nearly night. The remainder of the sunset was just a thin sliver of red above the black horizon. What did I just hear? I switched my weight between my hands and my legs until most of the feeling in my legs returned. Once I felt safe enough to trust my legs, I leaned back and turned an ear downward, thinking that maybe Sam was still alive. I definitely heard something. It sounded like tapping, almost as if a dog walked by on a concrete floor. In fact, that's exactly what it sounded like. I sat in near total darkness, perplexed. Of course, in my position and in my condition, I supposed hearing things would not be so abnormal. That was a scary thought all on its own. It was just dark. I was going to have to be here all night, hanging from a 4-foot piece of rope attached to an iron bolt. I was too tired to panic or cry, so I just held on for a few moments. The ticking sound was coming from below. It suddenly hit me. It could be a rescue crew climbing up from below. Hello? It just bellowed out of my throat involuntarily. I heard a heavy follow-up tick and a few taps from below. Hello? Is somebody down there? Silence. Help us! Can you hear me? All was silent. I leaned back as far as I could given my current and permanent position. I heard no tapping, no ticking. I was sure there was some sort of sound coming from below, though. Sam? Is that you, Sam? Rico? Somebody? Help! Help! All was silent afterwards. I resumed my minute-by-minute routine. Rest arms, rest legs, rest all, stretch, control the breathing, cry for help, on and on. I took a sip of water from my pouch and watched the flickering green and red lights of a jet pass far off in the distance. Somewhere on that plain, a passenger is looking down at the canyons, oblivious to me and my approaching death. I began to sob again. I missed my mom, my dad, my brothers. I missed Rico, my best friend, hanging upside down below with those solid black eyes. Oh! I shook my head to get rid of the vision. I hadn't had time to even acknowledge his death. I quickly pushed the pain aside. I didn't have time for that either. All I have time to do is stay alive for as long as I can. I thought, if I can make it through the night, I'll try again to find a way up the first light. Hours passed, and I was getting raw from the harness. My arms and legs were getting stiff and seizing up. I really began to worry about whether or not I would have the strength to climb, or even to descend by morning. I decided to try going up if I could. If I could just get back to a vertical position, I might have the chance to free climb to the top. At least I could rest then. The thought of rest made me incredibly tired. I let myself hang by the harness for a few minutes just to rest my body. I immediately snapped to attention. I wasn't quite asleep yet, so this time I was absolutely certain something walked past me. It sounded like a dog just passing on concrete. I dug into my backpack and fished out the flashlight. It wasn't a very large or bright flashlight, but it was all I had. I clicked it on, and a bright white circle appeared in front of me. I quickly shone it away and began to systematically scan the area around me. Maybe it was a tiny rock slide. I shone the light up as far as I could see and looked for any sign of a dent that I could get hold of later. To my relief, in the pitch blackness, the flashlight revealed every dent and bulge that could be seen. The daylight shining down on the hard, bright granite cliff did just the opposite. This gave me a bit of hope, and I decided right then and there that I would climb now and not wait for my energy to run out by morning. Suddenly, something caught my eye upwards and to the left. It was something shiny and green, like an emerald sticking out of the rock. As I moved the white circle of light towards it, it vanished. I moved the beam of light back and forth, thinking that I must have changed the angle of the light, wasn't hitting it correctly. Suddenly, I saw it straight above me. Again, I moved the light. It was gone. They were gone. 2 of them. Green like emeralds, but not emeralds. Eyes. Green glowing eyes. What was it? I was perplexed and a bit nervous. The last thing I need is to run into some huge bat or giant hawk up here in the middle of the night on the side of a cliff with limited mobility. I put the flashlight in my mouth and clapped my hands loudly and shouted, "Ah!" I heard a scamper below me and immediately grabbed the light out of my mouth, swung downwards, and leaned back. Every nerve in my body fired off all at once. There were several of them, pairs of glowing emerald green eyes attached to skinny gray stone figures. I screamed and they suddenly disappeared in all directions. Rico's feet were gone. There were 2 protruding bones in their places. I screamed again, pulling the light away and shining it all around me, up and down, side to side. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I wanted to climb, but I was shaking too badly to even hold on. I swung back and forth by my harness, holding on to the 4-foot rope, shining my light around wildly, until I had no other choice but to calm down. Above all else, I just wanted to live. Whatever they were, they ate human flesh. There was plenty of it down there, so I'm climbing up. I pushed up on the foothold, removed the slack from my lanyard, and unhitched it from my harness. I secured the flashlight onto my head with a bungee and reached up for another higher up pocket in the stone wall. I managed to pull myself up until I was able to put my feet in the grooves that my hands had been on the whole time. There was another pocket, and another, and then nothing. Nothing. I slowly lowered myself down into my fatal position and locked myself back onto the lanyard. I just let go and hung there, slightly spinning and sobbing uncontrollably. The rest of the evening was hell. Anytime I relaxed, I would hear that awful ticking and tapping. I would scream and clap my hands and flail the flashlight beam. They would go away for a little while, but they always came back the moment I sat still. They had huge mouths, but small, thin faces. But I have yet to get a real good look at one. The way they stretched and crawled made my skin ripple with goosebumps, though. And they moved so fast when I shouted at them. But now they're getting used to my shouting. Some of them just sit and stare at me. I finish off the remainder of my water. I watch as the sun sets once again. A full day's worth of defeat, crying, screaming, and just trying to hang on. I'm weak, exhausted, and scared. My attempts to climb failed. My attempts to descend failed. Sam is nowhere to be seen. Rico is nothing more than a mangled human torso, held together by a harness. I'm over being sick about it. I'm over my fear of death. There are worse things than death, I know that now. As the last sliver of pink light disappears beyond the horizon, I hear the ticking and tapping of wide, skinny, disgusting little claws, effortlessly stretching across and scraping the cliffside. I push up on the foothold, remove the slack from the lanyard, and unhitch it from my harness.